David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Don. And, good day to everybody. And thank you for joining us from wherever you may be. And as Don mentioned, I am in St. Petersburg, Florida, where it does still get to be about 80 degrees as soon as the sun comes up. So nice and hot here. So thanks for joining us. And yes, we are going to be talking about technology and social learning and how those two things are the crossroads that we are at, where social learning and technology meet. Before we get started, obviously you're going to be hearing from myself and as well as Ian Baxter, who will be showing us some examples of organizations who are actually putting this into practice. So I'm looking forward to that. Myself, I work for a company called Brandon Hall Group. Some of you may be familiar with us. For those of you who are not, we are a research and advisory firm with a strong presence in the learning research area. We've got about 20,000 different members throughout the world. We've been around for about 20 years. So you can contact me if you like through any of these channels here that you see on the screen. If you have any questions about this or anything else that you'd like to reach out for, feel free. Some of the things that we do at Brandon Hall Group is our various areas of focus, obviously learning development is what we're most known for, but we also do research in talent management, leadership development, and various other areas, as well as several different offerings, and we're pretty well known for our awards program. We see a lot of organizations that have won awards from us in the past. With that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and also thank Saba for joining us today and helping us out today. And just some background there on the screen about the size and scope of Saba's operation throughout the world and the solutions they provide as far as integrated talent management go. And we'll be hearing from Ian in a little while later on. And so today what we're going to walk through is a bit of the the evolution of learning, how we've ended up where we are today, why we're having this discussion about social learning, as well as what some of the trends are, what's happening in the space, and why it's important. And as I said, Ian's going to walk us through some scenarios where organizations have implemented social technologies for learning. And obviously throughout the process, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat box and hopefully answering questions and having a discussion. So speaking of answering questions, I would like to ask all of you to answer a question for us here through the chat feature. Just give us an idea of some of the ways that your organization today is leveraging social technologies. And it doesn't necessarily have to be learning focused, although that's what we're talking about today. But we know that many organizations experiment with social in other areas and other functions before they get to leveraging it for learning. So anybody want to share some of the different ways of leveraging social technologies, feel free to do that in the chat box. And I can see here we're starting to see some responses come in. Yammer, which I think is becoming quite popular, especially since Microsoft took it out on. Various chat forums and discussions, which is typically what we see. I think people really benefit from the various...
mentioned here, aren't there, David? Plenty of tools being used in different ways. But I just have to ask, is that the question you were asking? What are some of the ways could be interpreted in many ways? So a lot of people answering back with tools, was that the focus of your question?
Right, and what I think what we would like to hear from you folks is, so you have some of the tools that you use. How are you using them? What are you using them for? What's the end game? Is it simply to connect people? Is it focused on learning? Is it just a general organization-wide forum for people to connect? So just some experience. So you see here, you can see people saying that they use it for project collaboration, which is a big piece of it. Expert location, which is a great one.
Point of need learning.
Learning need for YouTube.
YouTube for that, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
And Tracy's giving a combination of tools and reasons using Twitter for the back channel and LinkedIn groups as well. Internal learning focus, says Michelle, sharing best practice. Quite a few people are talking about communities and sharing best practice and so on. By the way, I'm just going to take a quick break here. A number of people are saying they've got some trouble and they'd like to know more about sound. I'm just going to put a thing up on the screen which will give you all the details about how you can dial in. So sorry, that's going to block up the screen for a short while. I'm keeping it on there while people are trying to dial in. Linda and others are just having difficulty. The reason for that, David, is that we've got 120 people on the call, and sometimes when you've got that many people, the sound can come under a bit of pressure, so people are dialing in. Sorry, back to you, David, and this business of how people are using social technologies at work. Lots of examples coming through.
Yes, and I think that we see a lot of the stuff, the sharing of Google Docs, the ability to work from one document as opposed to emailing documents around. That's another big reason people use these tools. What you can see just by looking at this chat is just the various ways that this can be done and how they can be used. So, obviously there's a lot of potential here for the use of social within the organization. So as you folks continue to share your thoughts here, what I want to do is sort of take a walk through sort of how we got where we are. And I don't know, Don, if we're safe to move on with the dial-in.
I think I'm going to get rid of that because there's so much information on this slide. There's no space for anything else.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Sorry. So yeah, essentially, it's basically what I'm talking about here is just that in general. There's a lot of things at work. It's not just this idea that these new technologies are available. I mean, there's a lot of momentum behind that, behind the scenes that brings us to where we are. And it even goes back to just demographics and economies, the way we work, the way we think of things. Everything's coming to this point, and so you can see how things have changed throughout the changes within the different economies and this new economy, the whatever comes after the information economy. We're not exactly sure what we're in the midst of at this point, but we're at this point where things are starting to shift even from this information economy that we've been so used to. And during all this time, as these things have shifted and demographics have shifted, so has the way we learn evolved. And so there's so many different things at play here. So originally, the typical model was the apprentice-centered, the one-to-one relationship, moving on to the ability to teach one-to-many. Of course, we bring in something, later on, like the internet, where people can connect much broader and much farther across to one another. And now, as the internet has even matured and changed, gone from that sort of one-directional to a more multi-directional interface where you can now contribute and people can connect, and we're building these communities where the communities are connecting to one another. And during all of this, as the way we learn, none of these others go away, right? You don't see that there aren't any more apprentice models. That still exists. We see that in coaching and mentoring and other things. And obviously teaching center, that still exists. We still do the classroom. And all those things still exist. It's just as they evolve, new things occur and new ways of learning come into play, and they all work with each other. And as you can see here, sort of this is how we look at it, right? All these things stack on one another. No one thing replaces the one prior, and instead it finds its own place. It finds its spot in the spaces left behind by the modalities before it, to a point where we're here, and this era of social and mobile technologies have allowed us to make learning a much more everyday occurrence and a much more informal occurrence, and something that happens in a much more social way with the connections and the collaboration that occur. So we find ourselves in this place now where we're looking at what we here at Brandon Hall Group call relationship-centered learning. And we'll take another look at what relationship-centered learning means and what those types of organizations do in a little bit. But what happens now is we end up at this place of, how do we use these technologies to take advantage of all of this way we learn? And as Don said, we talk about social, and it's not necessarily about the technology first, right? This is just how we like to communicate as human beings. This is how we like to work. And so, showing that the 70-20-10, and there are different versions of this out there, but the idea is that, the majority of learning takes place outside of these formal channels, right? So we're moving away from the classroom, and the idea that how do we formalize the informal, so to speak. So we're looking for ways to facilitate and to measure and to track and monitor the types of learning that occurs in the 20 and the 70%. And so it's these new social technologies and these platforms that allow us to do that. So as I said, all at the same time, while this idea of how we can learn and the different learning technologies that are available to us are changing, so is the world of work. You know, we're used to the traditional way of working is a very, very hierarchical. Everything's very process-centric. You know, we build all these processes around what we do in an organization. You know, we like to talk about integration and cross-functional, but things were still very siloed for the most part, and so forth. And all of these things kind of fly in the face of where we are today, this new way of working. Most new organizations look at themselves more as a hierarchy, right? There's no up, down, top, bottom. It's more basically a network where things move in whatever direction they need to move at that time. It's more about the people. Collaboration happens from the bottom up as opposed to a lot of top-down control. You know, and there aren't those integrated silos. It's a borderless unification within the organization. And all of this, what it adds up to is this agile transformation. You know, organizations that look like these on the left, they're able to adapt, and they're much more agile when they move forward, and they're able to make these changes much more quickly. So where we are is, you know, then we come to the social point, is that we look at all these technologies, and we're going to look at some of the research around and some of the trends around social, but we're at this point where, you know, learners within your organization, they expect these social environments to exist. As you can see from the question earlier, the way everyone's using these different tools, you know, very commonplace, very normal for everyone to have these tools and be able to communicate this way. And so when they get into a learning environment, they're going to expect to be able to communicate in those same ways and do those same types of things. So what we're talking about is, it's not about the technologies, it's about a culture. It's about your culture of your organization encouraging these types of collaborations. And you know, we make this point and we'll make it again. It's social connections and collaboration. These are things that have happened throughout history. This is just how we work. This is how we communicate. This is how we collaborate. Technology didn't invent this. Social networking and social tools didn't come about and suddenly, hey, look, we now will work together this way. It's the opposite. It's the technology finally matches the way we choose to work and the way we choose to collaborate. So it's really about having a culture around this type of collaboration, and then the technology is a way to facilitate that. So it's not simply, you know, we're going to get social. Everyone talks about social. It's the buzzword. Grab a couple of social tools and we'll plug them in. So now once you get into our learning environment in our organization, there's a blog and people can comment on blogs, and that's the end of it. It's not about that. It's about matching the culture of the organization and creating an environment where people can learn and work together. So what we talk about is the social tipping point, and just to, you know, as an illustration, so to move from that left to right, you know, all these things have been working and building close. You get the technology, the shift in demographics, the millennials, and the different types of platforms that come around, like Facebook and then LinkedIn and Twitter come around, and people get more used to using these things, more comfortable using them, and bandwidth increases, and people get on their mobile phones, and mobile and social are so inextricably intertwined. You know, in previous, maybe 2 years ago or so, we would talk about these things in very separate terms, mobile and social, but in reality, the way most people are using their social technologies today is through their mobile phones, and so they're intertwined. And so all these things bring us to this social tipping point where it's now, you know, we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our organizations, of our learners, and creating these environments where they're able to communicate and collaborate in the ways that they want. And so what that means is, you look at learning technology, and though things are moving pretty fast, learning technology seems to have maybe moved a little slowly. You think of a lot of the systems that are in place within organizations, especially these larger talent management processes and platforms. They've probably been in place for a while, and you know, people install or implement these platforms with the idea that they're going to be in place for you know, years to come. They don't want something that they're going to have for only a year. So you look, and they maybe haven't kept pace, and so these older platforms are not adequate to meet these needs that we're discussing. They're basically very process-centric. It's very transactional. It's, you know, how do I get this particular checkbox done, and for sort of tracking these very basic things. When what we need is systems that allow for the dynamic sort of interaction, the dynamic collaboration, and the wide range of opportunities for learning, not just simple class tracking. It's everything is a learning opportunity that occurs, these different interactions and informal pop-up interactions that occur. And we need platforms that allow for that, that facilitate that, and can even track that. So these are the things that we're looking for in our new systems today. And just to sort of drive the point home, as I said, it's not so much about the technology, it's about the culture, it's about an idea. So, we are social animals, right? We enjoy companionship, the interaction for the better of one another. It's that cooperative and independent relationships. And so social learning and social technologies, we take those concepts, apply them to learning, right? So it's the companionship and the interaction and the cooperation around learning and the diversity of thinking and ideas, and using that focused on learning outcomes, and then taking these technologies to achieve those goals, to facilitate that. And so some of the research that we've done in this space for Brandon Hall Group, just to give you an idea, every year we ask organizations what they like about their current learning management system, and maybe what they're looking for in the future, and maybe if they want to change something. And so one of the questions we asked two different questions. One is, what are the if you're thinking about switching your LMS, you're thinking about making a change, what are your top 3 reasons for making a change? And then we also ask, when you're looking for a new system, and this is for people who either have one currently or don't have one yet, what are the top 3 things that you need your new system to have? What are the new features you need it to have? And these numbers have been growing steadily each year. And so the most current study from this year, if we focus on the social part, you see that 11% of organizations say the fact that their LMS lacks social tools is one of their reasons for wanting to switch their LMS. Now, 11% might not seem like much, but when you factor in all the different reasons people might have for wanting to switch, poor reporting, ease of use, poor vendor support, all that, 11% consider a lack of social features one of the top 3 reasons for switching their LMS. And then another 10% say that when they get a new LMS, whether they're first or a replacement, that one of the top 3 requirements they have for their new system is it has to have social features. It has to have some sort of social environment. So as we said before, it's about technology and culture. And so this gets me back into the talk that I mentioned earlier about relationship-centered learning, the end of the evolution. Where are we today? What type of learning are we at today? And what we found in our research, we've identified characteristics of organizations that meet these requirements, that basically what they do is they exemplify a relationship-centered learning organization. So the main 3 characteristics that we found by surveying all these different organizations is that they all have a proactive orientation. Their workforce has a proactive orientation to learning, that employees take responsibility for their development and they seek out learning. The other big one is these types of organizations have automated processes in place to facilitate informal learning. So that allows these learners to connect to informal knowledge sources with automated processes using technology. And the other big characteristic, each and every employee is presented with sort of what you can consider personalized or customized or contextualized learning opportunities. So this is the kind of thing that comes from a social environment, the ability to identify individual opportunities, individual strengths and weaknesses and job roles and so forth, and use that to deliver learning to those people that it's very customized and personalized. So that is what when we talk about an RCL, or relationship-centered learning organization, this is what we're talking about. And our study also found that about 80% of those organizations are all high performing based on the various set of performance criteria. So to give you an example of the difference between an organization that is relationship-centered around learning or those that maybe are not, you see here we asked those organizations that are RCL or show those that do exhibit those characteristics, they're far more likely to use public and social corporate social platforms for learning than those organizations that do not meet those criteria. So those organizations that are that far up on the evolutionary scale as far as learning is concerned. They're the ones that are heavy adopters of social environments. So going back to that idea about, that the tipping point and that it's where we are today and that it's expected, you can see here, just to give you an idea of what's going on in the world, Facebook has over 1 billion active users, LinkedIn 238 million active users, and Twitter is 200 million. So obviously, these tools have become relatively ubiquitous. We hear about them all the time. Well, one of the things that is interesting, we talk about people expect it, and whenever we talk about that, we always talk about millennials, right? We talk, the new people coming into the workforce, they've grown up on this and they expect it to happen, and so we have to do this because here come the millennials and everybody get ready. But the truth is, today, the fastest growing Facebook demographic is ages 45 to 54. And LinkedIn is growing, and people are expecting this type of connection, 2 new members every second for LinkedIn. And then for Twitter, very similar to Facebook, the fastest growing demographic there is ages 55 to 64. Now, this is a product probably that these platforms have been around for a while, and these demographics are finally getting on board. But what that shows you is that not only is this expected because you've got new workers coming in, but generationally across your entire workforce, people are expecting this type of communication, this type of interaction. So we talk a lot about Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and so we see that a lot of organizations rely on those tools to keep their people connected. You can use LinkedIn groups or private Facebook areas or use Twitter to communicate using hashtags. But is that really what we are talking about when we talk about social? And I think it goes back to the idea around culture, because not really, it can accomplish certain specific jobs, but it doesn't necessarily add to an environment or a culture around being able to communicate for each other. So there are advantages for using a closed social environment as opposed to relying on some of the public. Obviously, a closed social environment is more secure. You're more in charge of it. You're managed. You're not beholden to some larger public platforms changes and updates. Of course, when you have your own, it's not necessarily free, and it requires some management and setup on your part. And it can be an unfamiliar interface. When we talk about people expecting to be able to communicate this way, it may be because they're used to using these public platforms, and the social environment you have internally might not be the same. But still, if you have a sort of a unified platform for all of your talent management, that becomes less of an issue because that interface is familiar across all of the different talent management processes. And one of the big things too to remember is that if you are relying on public platforms for this type of work, 25% of Facebook users don't even use their privacy settings, don't even look at them. And so there's a lot of concern around that issue about security and privacy when using these public platforms, and obviously using an internal social environment mitigates that greatly. So some of the different ways that organizations use social learning, they can use it in sales to outreach to customers and marketing and deliver learning to customers, sort of that extended enterprise learning, and social engagement is one channel for that. Obviously onboarding, you can use social tools to reach out to new recruits and new hire orientation. A lot of organizations are using social tools and collaboration tools for new hires to make them feel much more part of the team and get a lot of informal onboarding stuff done before the person even walks through the door on the first day, so they already feel like they're part of the team. And then, obviously internal support for social learning, the discussions and the learn networks, and we've seen some of that in the responses you gave in the chat box earlier. And of course, knowledge transfer, right? Those expert directories, how do I find somebody who knows how to do this thing or knows the most about this? Expert directories point you in the right direction. And the wikis just for a place to share knowledge and to share documents and so forth. So there's a myriad ways that social tools can be used to enhance learning within an organization. But what I want to do is I want to bring in Ian and have Ian talk a little bit about some of the ways, specific ways certain organizations have taken social platforms and put them to use with some pretty good results. So Ian, please say hello to everybody and take us through some of this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. So thanks, David, for that. But before I go through the couple of examples, I'd like to go back to the point you made about the legacy talent and learning management solutions not being able to deliver in this new social way of working. That's a really interesting point you made, and it was obviously picked up by a number of people in the chat. So it's probably increasingly clear to us that companies need to offer something different in the platform, and that's something that will be able to deliver continuous learning, engagement and development of everyone in their people network. And that's not just the employees, it's the partners, and it's even customers. So at Saba, we think about talent management and learning a little differently. With our latest people development platform, the Saba Cloud, we have all of the same capabilities you'd expect in such a platform, such as performance reviews, goals, succession planning, career development, organizational platform, etc., etc. The list goes on. But at the center of all of these processes is learning. We really do believe learning is fundamental to enable all those processes to work well. And that will ensure the personal and professional development of your workforce. But where the real difference lies is that we've taken all the elements of social, collaboration and mobile capabilities, and we've actually infused our application with that. It's also intelligent, and it will continuously learn about the unique needs of each user, and it will provide ideas and suggestions for new learning, contacts and groups. And that's in a similar way to the way that Amazon makes suggestions, whether you like it or not, for other books and purchases based on where you've been on the website or indeed what you purchased. Ultimately, all of this is all well and good, but unless people use the product, you really have a fantastic application, but nobody on it. So that's why we've also focused on making the product as engaging as possible. And we've done that by allowing users to personalize their experience and making it fun. And I've even heard from some of our customers it's become addictive. So as this presentation is around harnessing social learning, I'd like to focus on that particular capability. So David spoke about the differences between internal social environments versus public social platforms. And again, I saw a lot of chat talking about whether people would realistically use a public environment for work. And that's probably a fair point. But we believe there's further differences between even the internal ones. So our Saba Cloud has many of the same social capabilities that you'd expect in a product such as Jive, Yammer, and some of the other commercially available platforms. But our social capabilities are different. Why are they different? Because they're infused within the learning and talent management platform. And most importantly, you can activate and use as much or as little at your own pace. You're not just suddenly thrust in a social environment, which doesn't suit everybody. So our social capability is not a separate application which you have to go to. It's part of everything you do, and that's quite fundamental. So David also referred to the 70-20-10 model. Now our LMS is probably well known in the marketplace, having been around since 1997, and I would say it definitely covers the 10% of how people learn. But coupled with the social aspects, it helps drive the other 90% of how people learn. So our Saba Cloud enables peer-to-peer feedback and interaction. It also allows the ability to collaborate in groups using chat, through real-time web conferencing, and also the ability to find and connect with experts. Now, the social aspects of Saba also help to enhance the formal learning process. People taking classes can be automatically enrolled in a group in order to connect with other peers and classmates to enhance the learning experience by sharing their thoughts, ideas and experiences about the subject, as well as collaborating on assignments online. Learners can also rate classes and share them with other people through their network, and therefore they provide some form of recommendation to other learners. So no matter how large or how good your learning department is, it's becoming increasingly difficult to meet the need of every single learner inside and outside your organization. We are beginning to see more and more learning departments using social learning to leverage networked content and expertise throughout the organization to build a broad and engaging learning culture, where everyone, and I mean everyone, is an instructor as well as a student. We see lots of people creating great content that is useful for other people. It's a different way to approach the challenge, but we feel a better one. And to prevent that steep fall in knowledge retention, where some studies have pointed to, I think about 80% is lost over 3 to 4 weeks without continuous reinforcement, our social capability continuously reinforces the learning with discussions, blogs, groups, workspaces and communities of practice which help reinforce that learning. So I'd like to look at a couple of examples which also illustrate how to get started. I was going to be showing a video about the Medtronic Corporation, and as anybody who was on the call a little bit earlier heard and saw, we were having problems with the sound. So I'll give you a very brief overview of Medtronic and some of the key learning points from that case study. We will be making the link to the video available after this webinar, so you will be able to watch it. So a little bit about Medtronic. It's a world-leading medical device technology and therapies company with about 46,000 employees based in the States, although they have a worldwide footprint. They had a formal learning solution in place, but wanted to increase the level of knowledge sharing and engagement because they had a particular issue to solve, and that was within the diabetes division. They had a high level of attrition within the inside sales department. This was made up predominantly of Generation Y employees, and the attrition rate was more than 2 employees a week. Now, anybody who's in business and is losing people at the rate of 2 a week knows that it's quite severe, and clearly there was something wrong. So they needed to engage them more. They needed to engage them more in terms of career development, peer-to-peer learning, and they needed to provide learning on demand and at a pace that was suitable for the employees. They recognized that the only way to provide this, especially for this generation, was to provide a social solution. Now, they did look at the market, and they looked at both standalone solutions and they looked at learning solutions, but they realized very quickly that they needed a mix between the two, and they went for a combined product, which happened to be the Saba Cloud. They created their own face to it and their own character to it by creating what they called My Edge. And this was the whole objective of this was to engage the inside sales team because it provided a key learning environment, but also a broader network for other hiring managers within the organization to start to identify and explain what additional skills they needed within the Medtronic group to provide some form of career development for the employees. So instead of leaving the company, they would see that they had a clear career progression within the company and therefore kept the skills within the company. Now, this was a new social experience, and for any company, it's a challenge, and I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't have a challenge when they first start looking at implementing a social environment. But what they found, and again, you would have to take my word for it, but you can listen to Gabriel Graham talk about this, he found that the employees adopted it very, very quickly. They were able to rate content, they were able to upload videos, they were able to follow their colleagues, and they were able to create this vibrant environment. And within 2 months of the deployment, and the deployment took 6 to 8 weeks, they had a high level of adoption and people were raving about their experience. Now, part of this was helped by an adoption accelerator which Saba provided, and that person was able to help with overcoming some of the usability issues that people had just getting familiar with the product. But the result was that the attrition rate has fallen off almost completely, and the results in terms of engagement have been so good that other divisions and departments within Medtronic are now looking at ways to deploy this technology to help them. Now, this action reinforces a great approach to adopting social learning in an organization, that of starting small, proving value, and then applying it to other groups and issues in an incremental approach. I'd like to look at another example, and that's Kaspersky. And Kaspersky Labs, it's again another worldwide company in the security software sector. Now, they're a smaller company. They have about 2,700 employees, and a third of those are in a technical environment, which presented Kaspersky with a real challenge. These people needed to be completely up to date, completely aware of issues that were happening in the security world, and they needed to be able to offer solutions to companies who were dependent on the Kaspersky product to keep them safe. Now, they had a formal learning system and they had formal learning processes, but it just wasn't keeping up with the speed of innovation within the security world. So they were falling behind quite rapidly. So they again recognized that they needed to go towards a social environment. So they implemented the Saba Cloud, not only to deal with the learning side of things, but also to look at the performance side of the people. But we'll focus just on the learning side. So the product was named Kaspersky Learning Space, or KLS as they call it, and it served 3 main areas in the organization. One, it provided all the formal learning, so it managed all the courses, certifications, etc. But it also provided all the informal learning, and it brought together all the learning from discussions, events, and ideas, which were indexed, rated, and accessible. And in that way, it creates new, fresh, and up-to-date content, and it's self-validating. And it's self-validating in a way that people only rate content they found to be useful or current. And then, as you can imagine, the good quality material floated to the top, and that kept it always fresh. And it also provided a single place for collaboration between the various groups when they came to solving problems. So they were able to do this in both real time and also in a social way, which is, again, all of this was recorded and indexed, making it searchable for future reference. So as a result of using that on a single unified platform, Kaspersky have seen the contributions increasing and ideas just increasing by 15% month on month. So every month, the volume of ideas and thoughts and creation of content increases 15% month on month. And the feedback from the employees is also very positive, because the Saba People Cloud provides them with a single place to go for all information, as well as providing the ability to suggest new ideas and improvements. So Kaspersky is a young company. It's a dynamic company, and they have found their employees welcome and benefit from these new approaches to learning and engagement. We now have over 50 companies using the Saba Cloud, which proves that technology works. However, as we've often seen, the biggest obstacle to making the move to a social environment comes from the very culture of an organization, and this is something that David alluded to earlier. And so it's also to an uncertainty of where and how to start. So therefore, I'd like to ask you the following question and see what your views are on this. So what do you perceive to be the biggest challenge to your organization of incorporating a social environment for learning? If you can just let me have your views using text chat. So whilst we're gathering your responses, I was going to hand back to David, who will talk about how to overcome some of the more common challenges in adopting social within your business. David, over to you.
Great, and thank you, Ian. And I think what you'll see is that the challenges have changed over time. Some remain the same, but as people get more and more used to these social environments and social platforms, and IT departments get more used to them and what they mean and how to use them, you see them shift a little bit. But you can see all the various ones coming in as far as reluctance from IT and security is a big one. The culture just isn't ready for it, perhaps. And then this other piece that we see a lot, the bandwidth and time. Does it take up too much time, these types of interactions, or is it, whenever something comes into the organization, a piece of technology, sometimes it's considered yet another piece of, yet another tool, something else I have to check in on. And then that's a big one to overcome. And that comes along with the culture and having an environment and showing the benefits of using it, and make, so that it becomes perceived more as a necessary tool, as opposed to another checkbox on all the various things you have to check every day when you come into work. So
David,
you can see everyone sharing all the various.
There's a couple of other things that people raise, which is time is absolutely a crucial one, as you said, and people have been saying that in the chat area, but also this business of people being, here it is here, having a lack of IT support is one key thing that's coming up, and a lack of support at the top level. Two key things that have come out in the chat area as well, which are another of the big challenges to incorporating a social environment for learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we'll try to talk a little bit, maybe even at the end, about the ideas around how to approach that, especially the senior buy-in and basically stakeholders, accepting it and buying in. So I just want to talk about some of the typical challenges that I've seen in the course of my conversations I've had with organizations about it.
David?
And yes.
David, just very quickly, because Don raised a point, and I'd like to point to a couple of things that are in place to solve that issue about senior managers' buy-in and culture. There's some great research that's knocking around from people like PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM, and Lloyd's Risk Index that points very clearly to, over the last 2 or 3 years, that senior management is beginning to get it and understand it, and they're now looking to their organization to tell them how to do it. So the risk that people feel in terms of support at the top. I think if you show your senior managers some of these studies, and again, we can make these studies available to you, or certainly provide links for where these studies can be downloaded. This provides some very clear direction that there's a general groundswell and that the herd is moving on this topic. So I don't think that's a really sincere issue. And I think if you challenge it and point to some of this research information, it may give a different complexion on it. Okay, sorry, David, carry on.
I agree. No, quite all right. I agree. So one of the things that we see, though, is that people still trying to figure out, organizations are still trying to figure out, what does it mean for them? What do we do with social? And, some of these sort of awkward, stumbling first steps around social, and they just add a tool and say, there, we're now a social organization. But it's the wrong tool, the wrong time. It doesn't really accomplish anything. It's not aimed in the right place. And so, you get these sort of half-hearted attempts at social that not only are they not effective, but sometimes they can come off as almost a negative experience. If forced and done incorrectly, it seems to have the opposite effect of, what is this? Why does this work? Why am I doing this? And then you've turned people off to it, and they're not going to use it, and they probably won't use anything else after that. So it's important that you find use the right tool for the right job. Don't do it just because. It needs to meet a specific learning need. Now, obviously, we can say in very general terms that more collaboration is a good thing, and so forth. But the idea is, when you're starting this, to find a specific need and meet it with a social environment, and lay that out. And this all gets to that idea of selling it to higher ups to get buy-in. If you can show what needs you're meeting by these tools, that's going to go a long way to getting that buy-in. So you pick the appropriate tool for the job, pick the appropriate tool for your audience, and remember that not everything translates into some sort of social media technology. It's got to be the right thing at the right time. Another challenge we talked about, and this gets a little into some of the things we've seen people talk about, time consumed, consuming time, or just, we talk about everyone is a content author, everyone's an instructor, and so, well, what happens when there's just everyone's providing content? And I suppose in reality that would be a good problem to have. I don't think we see that the problem is everybody contributes, but at the same time, what happens is there's a lot of information being shared. Once these environments get up to a certain critical mass, there's a lot of information being shared. So how do we make sense of it all? Well, the idea then there is, if that is a challenge, there are different things you can do. There's curation. You can either use specific designated curators, people who are knowledgeable in certain areas and they know what's good information, what's bad information, and how to sort of set that up. You can use moderation as far as the chat functions or discussions, have someone who's in charge of moderating it. And these are things that maybe you only need at the very outset to get sort of the tone set and have everything start off the right way, and then slowly over time you can weed those out. But a big thing here is our worries about not only too much information, but the wrong information, and these steps can mitigate that as well. But at the end of the day, we have to step back and remember that, your organization, you take pride in the fact, I hope, that you hire smart people, right? You've already decided these people work here. I trust them to a certain degree. So you have to sort of trust the platform. You have to trust the crowd, to have the wisdom to know what's good, to know what's bad. And through that process, through the social interaction, through the collaboration, the good stuff will float to the surface and the bad stuff will go away. And you just sort of have to have that faith. And I know that's a tough one, and that's sort of a loss of control issue, but with social interactions, you can't hold too tightly. If you get too tight a grip on it, it'll never work the way it's supposed to work. You have to sort of be able to let go at least a little bit and let it work. Another challenge that we see is sort of the opposite of information overload, right? It's the social ghost town. You build this platform, you have this environment, you set this all up, and everything's great, and then you say, we go live today, and then nobody does anything. And it just sits there, and there's no interaction. It just doesn't happen. Well, that goes back to, some of the earlier points about right tool, right time, making sure that this is meeting a need, so that there's an incentive to use it. But beyond that, there's other ways, once you've got this thing up and running, to get people involved. You can, you find those people that are very into it, very good at it, and you use them as evangelists. They can preach the word and talk about how, what they've done with it, how they use it, why it's important to them. You can tie rewards of any level. It doesn't have to be, something extravagant, but just some sort of rewards program around contributions and participation. You can even build in, if necessary, a sort of formalized participation model where people are incentivized by, look, part of your performance is we need you to contribute maybe to 2 discussions per month. Something at the beginning just to get people involved and get them started so it builds up its own critical mass and gets moving. And actually, Ian, I think you have like an actual real-world example of getting people to use one of these platforms.
Yes, I can talk directly about what we did in Saba. When we developed the product, it was obviously developed in the engineering department, and they became keen fans of it. And initially, they tried to throw it out to the company, and very much as people have said, people didn't know what we were going to do with it. We weren't sure how to use it, and it didn't really have a great reception. And it was in its infancy anyway, and so we had to rethink that one a little bit. But later on, as the product evolved and got better and better, the product marketing people took it on board, and they started using it in earnest with the product management people, and they used it to collaborate, they used it to have discussions, ideas, they used it for creating groups around particular product areas. They started to use it in earnest, and very soon that small group was held up within the company as being a kind of enclave of best practice. And it was only after they gave various demonstrations within the company that we were able to start saying, okay, I would like to start using that for this particular project. Let's say it was a project about running our global summit. Suddenly everybody who was connected with our global summit said, yes, let's create a group around it, and then let's use it properly for that. That was the best way of making it work. We found that just throwing it out there and having people work out how to use it just didn't work. You needed to have a very structured way of deploying it. And I think the other thing was, like most social platforms, there's masses of functionality, and initially you just need to reveal the functionality that people actually need to use as opposed to want to use, and then once they're comfortable with that, you can then reveal more of that functionality. I think the last point talks about rewards. Now that everybody in our company uses the system, we have an interesting kind of feature which is called the PQ score, which is about people quotient. And this is all to do with how much somebody is engaged with the system, how much they contribute to the system. And there's an algorithm that kind of measures your engagement, your connectivity, your contribution, your comments, and what have you. And it gives you a very public score. And so now a lot of the reward systems and some of the fun reward systems are built around those people that have got the highest PQ score, or those people who have increased their PQ score by the most. And so that gives that form of attraction to people using it. And again, I would say that content is always fresh on it. The content that's good, whether you're a new starter or an existing employee, you can easily find it because it's indexed, it's rated, and the good stuff always goes to the top. So it provides a kind of self-regulating system where the staff, the employees, regulate it, and so the old stuff gets pushed to the back and doesn't get looked at any further. So that's our experience directly. But certainly, do not just throw it out there and expect it to happen. It won't work.
Right, and I think one other thing to keep in mind too is, I see a future where social interaction or collaboration, or sort of your network score, if you will, how big of if you mapped out your collaborative network within your organization, how big of a hub a particular person is. I think that's going to become a competency in the future because everyone's different. We know that just from all the other aspects of work life. But look at something like Facebook or like Twitter. There are people out there that use these tools, and all they do is consume. They go and they read other people's feeds, they read other people's information, they read tweets, but they don't tweet themselves. And that's not probably going to change. I think that speaks a lot to just who we are as individuals and who we are as people, and we have to sort of make accommodations for that. We have to realize that in any given group, we're not going to have every single person is going to be contributing all the time, all this great stuff. You're going to have consumers, you're going to have producers, and varying levels in between. We need to recognize that and accommodate for that, and find the place for for everyone and make it work. But that's just the way these networks are going to exist and how they're going to live, and we need to work within that. So some of the considerations if we were in the early processes of thinking about how do we do this with social, just because you have a social platform, it doesn't mean that any social learning is going on. This goes back to having a specific purpose for the tool that you're putting into place. And as we talked about already, and this has been going through in the chat box and so forth, if you build it, they will neither come nor participate. There needs to be some personal incentive, whether it's an incentive that the organization creates or there's something internal to that person that that makes them want to use the tool. And again, it's not a fad. It's not, this is not just some, even though you've got all these public social tools that seem as though they're very fad-like and maybe their names are silly and so forth, and maybe they'll come and go. We've seen the, you know, if you go back far enough, you've seen the rise and fall of MySpace, and there's no reason to think that other social tools may not rise and fall just like that. But this concept, the underlying concept of using technology to connect people, allow them to communicate and collaborate, will not go away. So this concept is not a fad. In fact, I think technology and bandwidth and so forth is just going to accelerate this. But again, it's also not a cure for everything. You can't just build a social environment and figure all your problems are solved. There's a specific value and a specific purpose. But so each of the parts, again, this is goes back to, you can't just think, okay, I'm going to add a discussion and a blog and now my organization is social. It's the idea, the environment, the culture. It's so much bigger than the parts that make up the bigger social technology platform. So the other thing too is it goes back to relationship, right? So it's more about the relationships within the organization and exploiting those and leveraging those and getting people to really work together and communicate. So summarize a lot of the things that we've been saying. Again, it's don't think technology first when we think about this. Don't start thinking about platforms and tools. It's about the human interactions and layering the technology on top of those and using the technology to expand and strengthen those interactions. And so it's more about an environment, you know, someplace where these things are sort of happening organically and occurring naturally, and it's not, you know, seem like a burden. And if you can do this, if you can build sort of an environment like that, this becomes part of the daily workflow. It's not, is not looked upon as added work. It becomes just sort of the natural order of things, how I do my job as I get into this environment and I collaborate and share. And again, you can start small. It doesn't have to be some big, massive rollout of this brand new technology platform. You can find certain specific groups to target. You can find certain projects to use to you know, try it out and to start pilot programs, and then that allows for a quick evolution, right? You can do incremental rollouts. It worked well for this group doing this. Here are some lessons learned. Let's apply that to the next rollout, and you do so forth and so on until you know, it becomes better and better. And again, it goes back to solving specific business challenges, you know, and that goes to the buy-in. I think, you know, we've seen some of it in the chat box that the people who are responsible for making decisions or at least paying for things, they hear social and they think time waster. They think Facebook. They think it's a fad. So the idea of solving specific business challenges goes a long way to mitigating that. And then, you know, the whole idea is you're sort of trying to support that culture of coaching and mentoring, feedback and teamwork, all these great words that we use, even if you don't have a formal coaching program or a formal mentoring program in your organization. Social tools and a social environment allows those types of interactions to occur without the formality. The coaching occurs naturally. Mentoring occurs naturally. If you have an expert directory and somebody finds somebody who knows something about something, who's an expert in an area, and they reach out to that person, coaching takes place, mentoring takes place without formal channels. And so that's a key piece of this. And so all these things, coaching, mentoring, teamwork, collaboration, all that, they're so important. And these environments, that's what they're all about. That's how they operate. And so, of course, you always want to measure too. And measurement, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations. On the one hand, you can measure social learning initiatives very similarly to you'd measure regular other learning initiatives as far as, you know, using a Kirkpatrick levels and so forth. You know, if you're putting this thing in place, you're trying to change behaviors, you're trying to impart knowledge. So, you can do a level 1. Do people enjoy using the environment? You can do level 2. Do they know something now that they didn't know before, and so forth. But then you can also measure specific social things like the number of connections, how many connections, who your biggest network hubs are, what types of things get shared the most. And there's measurement that goes on organically if your system is set up the right way as far as voting and rating. You've got the crowd measuring their own content in real time. So keeping track of that is another way to measure. And the only other thing I'd say on top of all this is just communication throughout from start to finish. As always, if anything that you're going to change, any new environment, communication is the key, keeping people informed about what you're doing and what it means, and what it means for them, right? Isn't that what everybody wants to know, is what's in it for me? And so, sharing that is always important. So Dawn, if you want to, some of the questions that you've been seeing coming through, if you want to sort of shout out some of those, and we'll see if we can't maybe get to some of those answers.
Well, I would love to. We are very tight on time. It is 3 minutes to the hour, and we've got a whole host of questions that I would love to have answered. So what I'm going to do is make a quick observation on lurking, which cropped up, and I'd just like to say there's nothing wrong with lurking. We have a number of lurkers online. Some have continue to lurk, and that's absolutely fine. The question is, what value do you get from this? And somebody else, I'm afraid things have shot past, it might have been Chantal, said if everyone was contributing, then you wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. So lurk away, and of course, individuals will play different roles in different places. I lurk in some places, lead in other places, and a sort of active contributor in other places. So I would never confuse the number of comments somebody makes necessarily with the value they're getting from something. Now, I think we should have a whole conversation about this and about how you get people involved. Unfortunately, I think we are out of time. Bo says, great point there. Most Twitter users are lurkers. Absolutely true. Consumers, and that's a huge benefit of the platform. It enables you to be effectively a passive learner, but passive is not a bad thing. It probably means you're busy doing something else, and you can use it as and when you do. In fact, for me, what lurking is one way of people showing that's how they use the platform that's right for them. And trying to get people out of lurking is the wrong approach. What we should be doing to them is saying, well, how else can you use a platform that is valuable to you? And, of course, we have the contributions people are already making, saying, get them involved in a project. Absolutely, because as soon as we saw with Ian's examples and with the examples that you pointed out, David, when people start using something for something that's part of their work, then naturally they go from lurker to active contributor because it's useful. Goodness me, look, there's me saying we have no time, and I've talked for the last 3 minutes. Pathetic, isn't it, really? I'm supposed to know how to run these things. We are now effectively out of time. Cassandra says, thanks for letting me lurk. Cassandra, of course, in mythology was the woman who always told the truth. I think you've told the truth today, Cassandra, so thanks for that. I'm going to thank very much everybody for contributing. We've had a massive amount of contribution today, an awful lot of stuff in the chat area that's been tremendously useful. And I'm going to thank our speakers as well. Are there any takeaway slides? Yes, there's a complimentary research brief. How do we get hold of this, David? Is it necessary to contact you directly? What should we do about this?
Actually, Ian, I think
I can answer that.
Providing this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can answer that, yes. All the people who attended the webinar, we're going to send out, or not personally, the Learn Skills group, we're going to send out a webinar with a link to this asset. And in addition to that, we will make sure that some of the assets that I mentioned from PwC, Lloyds and IBM are also available on that, so that you can get some background into how to get your management to buy in more effectively to this type of initiative.
Thank you very much, Ian.
That will come up from Mark Penton.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Jason has says, Dankeschön. We say Bitteschön. If we can be useful, that's what we strive to do. I'm going to quickly wrap up. Can you share a slide on features of Saba for social and mobile? Preeti, I don't think we have time to do that, but what we'll do is, if anybody wants to know any more information about Saba or to get in contact with the guys here, I would suggest, could you get in contact with me, and I'm going to drop my details in here. Best way to get hold of me is probably through this email address here. And I'm going to encourage Ian and David, could you drop your emails in there as well, so that we could encourage people to contact you directly if they wish. If you've enjoyed the webinar, please go on to LSG Webinar, please go on to Twitter and use the hashtag #LSG